Well, hey guys. Today we're going to talk about some myths and misinformation about the Browning Auto 5, the original Auto 5, not the new Browning A5, which is a completely different shotgun. It looks similar to the original A5, but we're talking about John Moses Browning's invention, the Auto 5. So, one thing that is commonly said about an Auto 5, and I heard it my whole life, was that they're extremely hard recoiling guns. That's been said many times that they're really hard recoiling. That is typically for one of two reasons. One, the recoil rings, which are in here, and we'll show you them in a minute, are set up wrong. Two, the magazine tube is over lubricated. If the rings are set properly, the magazine tube is lubricated properly enough to allow the ring to slide, but not so much that it won't break. The recoil is fairly mild. Now think about this. The way this works is the bolt is locked into the barrel. And as it fires, the bolt and the barrel come back. See how the barrel comes back? It'll be with the bolt, and they come back together. That is the recoil action. You're just sitting there providing the pressure for it to come back. Another thing that's said often about these is that they're unreliable. There are lots of reasons that an Auto 5 can be unreliable, but they are not inherently an unreliable gun. It's typically either parts are broken or it's operator error. Another reason that your gun may recoil too hard would be a worn out spring, and we'll talk about that. Worn out recoil spring, we'll talk about that too. Yes, a lot of these guns don't have a recoil pad. They've got a hard butt plate. But when you're talking a standard weight Auto 5 that weighs somewhere 8.5, 9 pounds, typically not a hard recoiling gun. Even the light 12s that were like 7.5 to 8 pounds, depending on the barrel and the data manufacturer and all that, or the light 20s, the sweet 16s, etc. Even though lightweight for their day, fairly heavy guns. When set up properly, pretty mild recoiling. I've been shooting this one quite a bit. I've been squirrel hunting with it. I have it set up for heavy loads. I've been shooting 1 1/4 ounce, 3 3/4 dram, number 4s with a full choke. That typically is a recipe for a sore shoulder. I felt that this gun recoils less than my Browning AL390, which is known to be a soft shooting gun. It's gas operated, self-regulating. It's a fairly soft shooting gun, and it also has a Sims recoil pad on it. I felt that this gun was noticeably less in recoil with those heavy loads compared to my 390 with even 1 1/8 ounce 3 dram loads, which is a considerably lighter load. And actually, I thought it was fairly comparable to my 20 gauge pump with standard 7/8 field loads. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you keep your Auto 5 to be reliable and keep the recoil low? First, let's disassemble it. Always make sure it's clear. Point the muzzle away from you. Put a little bit back, a little bit of downward pressure. Hang on. Get a rag for some grip. Okay. Like I said, make sure you're clear of the muzzle. You push down on the barrel, loosen the magazine cap. Okay. Now everything comes off. Take off your forend. Lay that in a safe place where it's not going to get scratched up. And now you have your barrel. Now let's examine that for a second. Lay that down. Your barrel lug is tapered on the inside. There's a reason for that. You have a brass friction piece, also tapered. It fits in here. As the gun recoils and presses against the spring, it squeezes that and forms a break around the magazine tube. Let's lay this barrel down for a second. And then with heavy loads, you have another tapered end on this steel ring. It comes in on the back side and squeezes down as well. I need to push this. Oh, wow. Yeah, I need to do a little bit of work here. Hang on a second. This is shifted around a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of work on that. Okay. And I'll show you the proper way to do it. Give me a second here. Let me get this back inside the steel ring, this brass piece. Okay. So, you've got a tapered end on the brass ring, a flat end on the other side. Taper goes inside the taper on the barrel lug. And then this taper goes on the back side and allows for even more braking for heavy loads. So the proper setup for heavy loads: steel ring, bevel up, friction ring, bevel up, and it should move freely but not loosely. Just enough friction that it can hold itself in place with a lightly lubricated magazine tube. Lightly, just enough that you can feel a little bit, that you can kind of tell that it's got some lubrication on it. Art from Art's Gun Shop recommends some synthetic motor oil. Guys use different things. I've heard 3-in-1 oil. I've heard guys use lithium grease, things like that. But lightly lubricated. And the way I've seen Art do it, you put maybe a drop around the friction ring and then a drop or two on the magazine spring, or on the recoil spring, sorry. Then just spin it like that to kind of get it going around. Put a drop or two around here, spin the spring around to spread it out a little bit, and then that allows it to slide up and down. If your magazine tube is rusty and pitted and things like that, it's going to cause it to grip more and going to cause some reliability issues potentially. One one issue you may have if you've got it set up for heavy loads and you're shooting heavy or even lighter loads and it's recoiling really heavy, you may have your magazine tube over lubricated. Dry it off. Take some alcohol or whatnot, rub all of it off, lightly lubricate it, try it. Another thing, check your recoil spring. Is it straight? If it's got a bend to it, many times, that means it's worn out. Means it's weak. And that can cause issues. Another thing is, a lot of times, these are set in backwards. The steel piece isn't put in. Sometimes these are missing altogether, and it causes the gun to have excessive recoil because the barrel slams into the back of the action. The barrel and the bolt slam into the back of the action, causing excessive recoil. Art recommends starting off with heavy loads and see if your gun functions. Even when shooting light loads like ounce and an eighth 3 dram field loads for doves and things like that, try the heavy first. If it works, leave it alone. If it doesn't, go to light loads. If it still doesn't, lubricate your magazine tube and that'll probably fix it. I am certainly not an expert, but I've been playing around with this thing, and it's one of the softest shooting auto loaders I've ever fired in my life. So, and it's been very reliable. So let's put this thing back together. I've got the tubes back set up for heavy loads because that's what I'm going to be shooting most. And even when it comes dove season, I'll probably try set up for heavy loads, and if it works, I'm going to leave it alone. Okay, let me get it put back together. I'll be right back with you. And then just hand tighten. Put a little bit of pressure on the barrel. A little bit of downward pressure. Hand tighten the lug. Then let it come back up. Okay. Hand tighten the nut, sorry. Let it come back up. Get my fingerprints off of this thing. Fingerprints have salt in them and they can cause the gun to rust. So try to keep it fingerprint free. When you're done shooting it, wipe it down with a lightly oiled rag. Your finish will last a lot longer that way. Another reason, and people don't think about this, another reason that your gun may not function properly, and this can happen with all sorts of recoil or the inertia style auto 5, not auto 5s, but auto loaders, sorry, is you rock with it. Think about this. The force of the recoil is pushing that barrel and bolt back into the action. If you're rocking with it, you're taking away some of that inertia. And it can cause the gun to hang up. I've seen it happen with auto 5s. I've seen it happen with lots of different firearms. So take a good stance, lean forward, lean into it, like you're taught in hunter safety and all those other classes you've taken over the years. Lean into it a little bit and let it come back firmly into the meaty part of your shoulder. Don't hold it out here. That will cause the recoil to feel much harder than it really is. If you're out on the ball of your shoulder, that's going to hurt. Another thing is, a lot of guys haven't shot these guns. Then they take them out and they dove hunt or they duck hunt and they're shooting a lot of overhead shots. That will make the recoil feel much harder than it really is because of the position of the gun. And also because of the tendency to, as you raise up, to raise the gun up a little bit. And it goes from being on the meaty part of your shoulder to being up on top of your shoulder by your rotator cuff and that can cause a lot of pain. But if you remember to keep it down, lower your face down a little bit, that will help a lot. Also, some guns have had stock work and whatnot done, and the drop of the comb is different things, and it causes it to feel different. But this is an all-steel autoloader, fairly heavy. Probably very well balanced with this 26-inch barrel, but probably about a pound heavier than my Beretta. Not much heavier than, say, an 1100 or an 1187, something like that. Another comparable steel frame gun, the old Remington 1148s, Model 58s, things like that. Not really a lot heavier than that, but still a fairly heavy gun. And the weight, is it going to be as soft shooting as a comparable weight gas-operated autoloader? Probably not. But it's going to be much softer than a comparable weight solid breech gun, like an over-under, or a pump, or single shot, somewhere along those lines. If you notice, Browning Satori's, BT-99s, BT-100s, things like that are fairly heavy guns because they're solid breech and they recoil fairly hard. There's nowhere for the recoil to go. Remington 870, not an extremely light gun. Now, Mossberg 500s, some of the others, those are fairly light, but they're made to be carried a lot, shot a little. This gun, made to be carried a little and shot a lot. It's a fairly heavy gun, but it was revolutionary in its time, being that it was the first auto-loading shotgun. And it's an excellent, very reliable gun. You still find these in use in Argentina and places where there's a lot of high volume shooting, and you still find them in duck blinds every year. If you have one, I'd recommend getting a spare rebuild kit or two. It comes with magazine spring, bolt spring, or recoil spring, bolt spring, more friction rings, etc., so that over time you can replace those parts as needed. Keep them in a safe place. You'll have them on hand. The average guy that just shoots maybe a couple hundred rounds a year, it might last them a lifetime without having to replace those parts. But the guy that shoots thousands and thousands of rounds may have to replace them sooner and sooner. So keep that in mind. Some guys that really have trouble with them functioning with light loads will keep an old, worn out recoil spring and set it up for light loads and do it that way. That seems like a lot of work to me. But it may work for you. Some guys just put a little bit of extra oil on it when they're shooting really light loads and find that it cycles really well that way. I never recommend taking all the friction pieces out just to get it to function. You can cause damage to your stock and to the firearm itself. You don't want to do that. But it's a reliable gun. It's a smooth handling gun. Very well balanced. I mean, that's right where it's supposed to be. This is with the 26-inch vent rib barrel. With the longer barrels, if they're vent rib and the heavier Japanese barrels, they tend to be a little more muzzle heavy. With the longer Belgian barrels, they're thinner walled, and they tend to balance about where this one does. Like a 30-inch plain barrel is going to balance about like this. But this is just a very good feeling, very accurate, very reliable, low recoil firearm. Remember, this design is well over 100 years old. It is not going to feel on your shoulder like a brand new Benelli or something like that. But don't be scared of them just because Uncle So-and-so said they kick hard. Um, Same goes for Remington Model 11. Savage and Stevens made different variants of them. Same goes for those. Um, or the Franke, I believe 48, which is based on this design. Now it has an aluminum receiver and it's a fairly light gun, so it is going to recoil more. But if you've always wanted one, but you've just been scared of the recoil, or people told you they were unreliable or whatnot, when set up properly on a good functioning gun, some guns have broken parts and things like that. Remember, when you pick one up, it could be 100 years old or more. Remember that. Have a gunsmith look at it that knows what he's talking about. Have a good gunsmith. Look at it, make sure there's no broken parts, parts that need replaced, etc. And you'll have a reliable, moderately recoiling firearm that will last you a lifetime. Thanks, guys. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and we'll see you next time.